you remember when you'd wake up in the morning back in the days and 99% of the world pretty much woke up the same way? We woke up, we heard nature's call, and we answered it. We needed to pee. It was easy. There was nothing going on there. But then you throw in smartphones, you throw in a bit of Facebook to that, and you're just lying in bed. You hear nature's call to pee, but you don't answer it. You scroll. And then you might scroll some more, and some more. And you might even get to the point where you're Googling, will my bladder explode? And you finally give in and go to the bathroom. And it's mad behavior, but I think I was doing it this morning. And I think a lot of us have done it. And often the time, we're just looking for a little bit of entertainment. The brain doesn't pay attention to boring things. We apply this to our content. We have a recipe that we know is in line with social trends. We don't get news in traditional manners anymore. We very much get it with a level of entertainment. We got accustomed to getting it from people like this, and then we're like, that is better. I laughed, I remembered it, I learned, how do I apply this? So a lot of companies are using this at the moment, and we want to know how to replicate that, and we want to take advantage of a very powerful statement, that the end of laughter is followed by the height of listening. So the most attention you'll ever have, ever, is the moment after you make someone laugh, because their brain goes, give me more of that. So that little dopamine spike leads to very engaging content. As we've talked about a lot today, and those of you who were there yesterday as well, the best marketing these days doesn't feel like marketing at all. It just feels like a friend chatting with you, interacting with you, or being a little bit witty. So one of the very good questions somebody had there was, what if your brand is too serious for anything comedy or humor orientated? Imagine you're in a car crash at the moment, which is a terrible scenario, or this morning or yesterday. Something's wrong with your car. You're in trouble. That's pretty serious. You use that for getting your family around. You need insurance in that scenario, right? Would you trust insurance and that money that really get you out of that station? Would you trust a talking lizard to give you that? Oh, Geico, yeah, perfect. Let me talk to a talking lizard. That'll solve my problems right now. But when you think about it, that's one of the most sensitive topics you can ever deal with in life and insurance, and yet we're perfectly socially conditioned to have a talking lizard selling it to us. It's mental, but it's not the only brand doing that. It's usually a little bit unusual. So there's a ton of cool companies at the moment playing around and using humor and realizing you don't have to be the same way on LinkedIn as you are on Facebook. You can experiment on the different mediums, and that way you can start to at least bring humor into part of your content strategy. Some of the tweets from these are lovely. Wendy's are always brilliant. I don't have a Wendy's at my location. What should I do? Wendy's, move. Not too many words there, but it's still funny. They're just behaving like another person would behave. There's a cell phone provider. Oh my God, I'm using American terminology already. Mobile phone company, cell phone provider in the UK, very much like Verizon and AT&T here, except they actually work. They're called O2, and this is them. Hey, O2, please get your SMS working. I sent this girl 246 texts last night asking her out, and none of her replies have come true yet. Hi, James, that's a lot of texts. Maybe next time you should try sending one text to 246 different girls. Dating advice from your cell phone provider, which could be kind of useful, to be honest. Pete needed it. We've got so used to people interacting with us with a level of humor that even the experts we turn to in the world of marketing are really funny when telling you about this topic. So a lot of you will be familiar with Seth Godin. His talks are so funny that even TED talk about them as being hilarious. They describe his talks as hilarious. And his talks about telling you about marketing are so funny, they actually make you laugh 3.4 times per minute. So there's a metric called laughs per minute, and you can judge how funny something is. And that means nothing, or it doesn't spike the mind as strange until you compare it to the funniest movies of all time. So Airplane, The Hangover, and The Naked Gun, 3 funniest movies of all time. This guy talking about marketing in a TED Talk is funnier than all the funniest content in the world ever produced. Imagine that in Ireland if I call my friends and I'm like, it's Friday night, we're going to get a few beers and some wine, come on over, we're watching TED Talks. I'd have no friends left. Now over here you have Harvard, you know, it's a bit intellectual, there's probably 1,000 people outside your door for that one. But it's very unusual when you think about it. So these people actually stand out, and some weirdo, because he had too much time on his hands, correlated all the world's leading talks for humor, and it turns out they all have one thing in common. They're all actually super funny. So these are all researchers. If you look at Mary Roach, Sean Asher, Ken Robinson, They're talking about topics, they're researchers, they're presenting research work and findings, and they're all equally as funny as the world's funniest movies, which is insane. They're in and about the same level. So if you want to be heard these days, getting heard a lot of the time means being in some way funny. So we're going to look at replicating that. By the way, Mary Roach's talk on female orgasm is an epic talk. Have any of you guys seen it? Any guys in the room seen it? Just one, smartest man in the room. He's like, I just watch it all day, every day. I really like to prepare for it. Good man yourself, good talk. But, so, we have a bit of content, we don't know what to do with it, how do we make it funny? You've had heard a lot this morning about being funny and using humor, but how do you actually do it? So I'd like you to ask yourself, what would Jerry do? So imagine you had the benefit of this fella sitting on your content writing team, and you give him something, he's not going to put something boring out there, right? He's made his whole life about just putting a funny filter on something, taking in the mundane and making it entertaining. So what are a few of the techniques he's using? He's very much going to take that content and apply comedy writing techniques to it. So I want to give you a quick few. Frustrations and pain points is always a wonderful place to start. If I have an accent, which you think would be a cool thing in America, and it is until the moment I try and call your wonderful automated customer service lines, that take years off my life emotionally. It's very much like, geez, here's my Bank of America voice. It's like, thank you for calling Bank of America. For English, press 1. Para español, marque 2. If you're Irish, just send us an email. And that would make my life a lot easier. I was fundraising, funny enough, over here last year for a topic very close to my heart, people with spinal cord injuries. And I was sending out all these emails trying to raise money for people with spinal cord injuries around events. And I'm dyslexic. And I didn't realize for ages, you know the way you end emails in the business world, kind regards, pretty normal? I was doing that, but unfortunately I was mixing up a G and a T, and I ended every email kind retards. Oh yeah, for 2 whole months. And that's kind of how I felt. And then I tried to be office cool sometimes and just dropped the kind and just wrote retards. That was the most mortified I've probably ever been in my whole existence as a person. And it was horrendous, but you sick individuals are laughing at it. But it's funny, right? If you're like, oh, I'm not funny, I'm not someone who can tackle humor in any way, if it's embarrassing or frustrating for you, it's funny for me. So it's just, you heard the tragedy plus time, comedy is tragedy plus time. This can be horrendous at that moment it's happening, but 2 months later, you're like, that was kind of funny. It's just are you willing to share it with people? Another way of adding to that nicely is comparing and contrasting things. We heard a little bit about that yesterday. Like America is unbelievably positive for us who come here from outside of America. Ireland, not so positive. I made a little experiment. It was a video of me kite surfing under the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, which I thought was pretty cool. And I posted it, and the American comments came in, and the first one was like, oh man, kite surfing, that looks amazing. Always wanted to learn. I was like, oh my God, you got the perfect day. Hope you had a great time. Irish comment, I hope a shark bites your balls off. And that was my mother. Should have never let her on Facebook. But comparing and contrasting those things usually does a bit of humor and sticking stuff together. Analogies is also another great one that's often underutilized. So this is a day that, do you ever see someone, by the way, when you combine these stuck in traffic and they're having a total meltdown in their car and you can see them hitting the wheel and honking and you're sitting next to them and you're just like, haha. They're losing it. That frustration is funny. And this is a topic that makes me lose it a little bit. You might have seen this in March in this part of the world. Happy St. Patty's Day. Number one thing that gets me a bit emotional about this, that's a 4-leaf clover. We love shamrocks in Ireland. 3 bits to a shamrock, central to our culture. 4-leaf clovers, nothing. Nothing got to do with the country whatsoever. That's like if I came over here and enthusiastically went and got a tattoo of a pigeon on my arm and then added an American flag. Go America! And you're like, oh, no. I see the intention was there, but that's a bit off. And then Patty, what's Patty? We have Paddy, a man's name, Patty, a woman. You can't just change the patron saint of Ireland's name like that. You just one stroke and you turn them into a woman. You just went all Bruce Jenner on our patron saint. That's a bit much, isn't it? Like, imagine I was like, David, where are you going on the weekend? I'm going out to celebrate. What are you celebrating? I'm celebrating Martin Luther King Day. Martin Luther King, oh yeah, he marched for 5 days, crossed the bridge at Selma, got down on one knee, changed the face of America forever. Go Martin Luther King. Like just one typo, it turned him into a lesbian tennis player. An analogy will help someone remember to live. So it's very hard to feel that shared frustration in traffic, but if I give you a way that you're like, oh, Martin Luther King, yeah, that's not correct, you might remember to stop calling it St. Patty's Day. Gets us Irish people very emotional. Okay, moving on. Okay, moving on. So, just stick some stuff together. You'll notice Tim Ferriss do this a lot in the world of content creation. He takes things he likes, like jiu-jitsu and language learning, and just links it to other topics. In that way, if you're writing about something you don't really like, there's always a way to link it to something you do like. So learning this, for me, was like fill in the blank. What do you love? But it allows you to transition between things you're being tasked with creating and meshing that with things you actually love. Link things. And most people look at something at first sight and they're like, that doesn't go together. Conceptually. Remember Twins? Worst movie ever. But just look at it. It doesn't make any sense. But it does when they make it make sense to you. Stick things together. Update the Force Luke. Adobe One Kenobi. Doesn't really make sense. Doesn't really go together, but you can make it go together if you really want to, right? And there was a whole, remember all the Deflategate scandal around this part of the world? But this one was a good way of jumping in there. Avocados from Mexico. You know what you can't deflate? An avocado. Makes no sense, but got them a lot of social traction over the Super Bowl because they're linking things that shouldn't be linked. They took what they wanted to get out into the world and linked it with what's happening in the world. Very easy for you to do. Callbacks work really, really well. For the group of us that were in the room yesterday, the biggest joke in the whole conference was Tim Washer at the end put in a picture of bald guys crossing their arms, right? Because we had heard a talk earlier in the day, the key to being an influencer was being a bald guy and crossing your arms. So a callback is very much a shared joke between you and the audience that couldn't have been pre-prepared. A callback is just a reference to something that was already funny that's shared between you and the audience. It's kind of an in-joke, but something that already worked. So if you write an article and you think they really liked one part of it, try and loop back to that in the end. So you just want to reference it a second time. Usually you can reference it up to a certain magic number, which is 3 times. Delay callback words is very, very important. So when you're creating content, like the box this morning, you want to keep the surprise until the end. Like the video when they were torturing the watermelon, you keep the surprise until the end, very important. So if you have an impact word or an impact statement on your bit of content, go out of your way to try and move it to the end. So comedians live off this because the surprise element has to be at the end. It makes your timing look good, it allows people to laugh, but in content creation, it heightens the keyword. So if you have an 80% growth rate year on year, there's a key metric in there. What is it? That people might invest in you, that people might be excited about? 80% growth rate year on year. What's really important in that statement? 80%, right? So I know that, that's the key bit, so now I gotta rework it. We had a growth rate year on year of 80%. Sounds way more powerful, it's more impactful, and it gives you a mental cue that that's a sentence stop. This is the important part, I need to pay attention to it. Very powerful in content creation, video marketing, any form of sales, and public speaking. And you'll see that a lot of the time combined with a number that Irish people can't pronounce. And try the rule of 3. Every time we say 3, it goes horribly wrong. And the rule of 3 is the smallest number of elements that your mind can recognize as a pattern. So if you want people to remember your content, and a lot of you I know are writers, so you're living off this, and marketers, but the rule of 3, if you weren't aware to it, it's been influencing a lot of things in your life because it's memorable. In the world of comedy, we use this as 1, 2, 4. So it's a pattern, it makes sense, I'm breaking the pattern, but it only logically makes sense on reflection. So you only know I was multiplying the numbers when you look back at that, and you're like 1, 2, your mind's expecting 3, I give you 4, you're like, oh, it still makes sense. He was multiplying the numbers. Comedy is very much setting a trail and breaking it in the shortest time period possible. And the shortest way to do that is 3 elements. So if you think of it like apples, apples, oranges. And if you play with that order or make it weird in any way, it doesn't work. So a lot of people talk about comedy failing most of the time. That can be the reason a lot of the time. You just have your sentence structure wrong, which is an easy thing. I want to show you a clip of this in action because it's hard to explain sometimes, but easy to recognize. I want to show you a clip of a president speaking, American president. And don't worry, not that one.
There are 12 different agencies that deal with exports. There are at least 5 different agencies that deal with housing policy. Then there's my favorite example. The Interior Department is in charge of salmon while they're in freshwater, but the Commerce Department handles them when they're in saltwater. I hear it gets even more complicated once they're smoked.
So it's not exactly viral hilarity. But compared to what was going on in Congress that day, that was pretty interesting stuff. And when NPR surveyed people, they only remembered 2 words, smoked and salmon. You can very clearly see he's establishing a pattern and breaking it. Freshwater, saltwater, 1, 2, 4, smoked. Apples, apples, oranges. So there's a very clear change in that. And you'll see this centrally everywhere you look once you start looking for it. So with all memorable, sticky campaigns, Nike, just do it, yes we can. Usually always 3 words because that's easier for you to remember. If it's easier for you to remember, it's easier for you to repeat. You spend less money on marketing your stuff because other people do it for you. So you'll see it as you were growing up as a kid, it was always 3. 3 amigos, 3 little pigs, 3 blind mice. Like, why are there always 3 of these things? Except for Ninja Turtles. I don't know why that is. There's always 3. Company names, a lot of the time from NPR to BBC, usually abbreviation of 3 context. This is just a good illustration of it from a sign, walking down the street for a bar. Free beer, topless bartenders, and false advertising. So again, not exactly viral hilarity, but what happens if I move the 3rd element to 2nd? So if false advertising is 1st or 2nd in that sequence, what happens? It's just weird. Like, not even Irish people are going into that bar. But it's very, very important to consciously seek that out, apply it, and use it, and leave room for the maximum success. So a lot of people write books in the world, aspire to write books, and when they do it in their marketing, I ended up writing one about all this lunacy, and you'd get quotes from people on the back. My book is amazing, read it, whatever, right? Some celebrity influencers who are bald guys with their arms folded somewhere. So I reached out, and I got 1, of course, I got 2, of course, and then I have 3. This book is great. I haven't read it yet, but David drew a picture when he was 6 years old of a penguin drinking beer in a Chinese restaurant, and it was clear the potential for slight wisdom and misguided creativity were there. Marita Nihill, David's mother. What happens if I put my mother in 1st or 2nd position on the back of that book? Oh, I'm a lunatic. I'm never selling any books ever. But because of that word order, it really is effective. So when you put this together in content, even things you think is boring content, like PowerPoint. Even when you say the word PowerPoint, people are like, ugh. PowerPoint, it's horrendous, right? Imagine I voluntarily tried to get people to sit at home and for fun, just look at PowerPoint. There's nobody even there to tell you about it. Let's just check out the slides. Won't that be great fun? Right, and here that is. There's a medium for that, right? SlideShare, LinkedIn, amazing. Anyone here from there, I apologize. But I use these techniques in there, and at the moment there's like nearly 750,000 views from my presentation without me giving it. I hate public speaking. That's like living the dream. I'm like, here's the information. I don't have to come. Magic. Leave me alone. Perfect. But that's a pretty boring piece of content you're trying to put together, which was a book trailer for my book to drive leads to it, but it works because all these elements are there together. Rose are red, bacon is red, poems are hard, bacon. That's a complete failure of everything we've just talked about, and it's still funny. They went for the rule of 3, they tried to flip it, they tried to do stuff, and then they went, screw it. And in acknowledging their failure, it was also funny. So a lot of time in comedy, when something doesn't work, you just say it didn't work. Once you let people know it didn't work, usually they're fine with it as well and extremely supportive. Now, I could stand up here and tell you that all day, that the audience are on your side, they will support you, they want you to see funny content, they will wait all day for you to say something funny, and they will love it because of exactly what we said. But this is the best example I could ever find anywhere in the world to show you all that, and I hope it works now that I've built it up like that. But
this is how bad I was at sex the first time. The first time I ever had sex.
Yesterday?
Glad you remember.
oh, I totally love that man. He's the best example ever that the end of laughter really is followed by the height of listening. So remember, nothing from today. Research says that when we were kids, we used to laugh about 300 times on average, and now the average person in this room, about 15. You're a funnier bunch based on what I saw yesterday with the marketing, so I'm sure you're a lot higher. But the average person you're working with laughs about 15 times a day. So if you're one of the people that brings a bit of that, whether it's in person or infusing it in your content, it makes a huge difference. So if you take nothing away from all this lunacy, I'd love you to remember just to start with pain points. It's an easy starting point for humor. What's frustrating for people like the person in traffic, like me calling Bank of America? Think fun over funny. Just get a bit playful with it and link it to things you actually like. And ask yourself, what would Jerry do? And use those comedy techniques. Because at the end of the day, whether you're calling Bank of America, or you're stuck in traffic, or you're sending out emails, sadly, with kind retards at the end of everything, what's embarrassing for you is usually funny for me. And at the end of the day, more funny means more engagement. Thank you very much.